The billionaire dropped his watch. The maid's toddler returned it. What he learned next left him speechless. Marcus Calloway had a rule. He didn't repeat himself. Not in meetings. Not in negotiations. Not in life. If someone didn't understand him the first time, they weren't worth his second breath. That was how he had built Calloway Industries from a single struggling logistics firm into a $7 billion empire that stretched across 14 states. That was how he had fired 3 CFOs in 4 years, outlasted 2 recessions, and turned every setback into a stepping stone while other men crumbled. He was 48 years old. He had a penthouse on the 63rd floor of a building his company owned. He had a car collection that filled a climate-controlled garage on the ground level. He had a chef who came in 3 mornings a week, a personal trainer who arrived before sunrise on Mondays and Thursdays, and a housekeeper, a rotating staff of 1, who kept his 17-room home in perfect, invisible order. That was the word he preferred. Invisible. He didn't want to see the people who worked in his home. He didn't want to hear them. He just wanted his shirts pressed, his kitchen clean, and his floors so polished that they reflected the skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows. He was not cruel. He was very clear about that distinction, at least in his own mind. He paid well above market rate. He provided health insurance. He left detailed notes about his preferences and expected them to be followed exactly. That was not cruelty. That was standards. The woman who had been cleaning his home for the past 3 months was named Elena Voss. She was 29. She had brown hair. She always kept in a low braid when she worked. She was quiet, efficient, and thorough. In 3 months, he had spoken to her perhaps 11 sentences total. He had noted this mentally and found it acceptable. What he had not expected, what had not been written into the arrangement and had therefore not been approved, was the child. It happened on a Tuesday in late October. Marcus had taken a half-day from the office for the first time in 2 years. A minor chest tightening the night before had prompted his doctor to strongly suggest he rest. Marcus had not rested. He had instead come home at noon, fully dressed in his charcoal suit, and sat at the long dining table with his laptop open. He heard her before he saw her. A small sound. Soft, syllable-less. A kind of running commentary in a language that existed only inside the mind of a person who had not yet learned to filter their thoughts before speaking them aloud. He looked up. Standing in the doorway of the hallway that led to the kitchen was the smallest person he had ever seen in his home. She was maybe 3 years old, possibly younger. He had no experience calibrating the ages of very small children. She wore tiny dark blue leggings and a yellow sweater that was slightly too big for her, the left shoulder drooping down toward her elbow. Her hair was 2 wispy ponytails that had been pinned carefully, but were now somewhat loose, framing a round face and 2 enormous, absolutely fearless brown eyes. She was staring at him. Marcus set down his coffee cup. He stared back. The child tilted her head. She was holding something, a small, soft animal of some kind, a bear or a rabbit. It was impossible to tell. Worn gray with use. She held it loosely in one arm, the way a person holds something so familiar they have forgotten they are holding it at all. He heard rapid footsteps from the kitchen. Elena appeared in the doorway a moment later, her face pale and her expression the kind that exists only in the body of a person who has just experienced absolute terror. She had a cleaning cloth in one hand. She was already talking before she was fully in the room. "I am so sorry," she said, her voice low and breathless. "I had no other option today. Her daycare called this morning. A pipe broke and they had to close. I should have called you. I should have rescheduled. I'm sorry, I'll..." "How long has this been happening?" Marcus said. Elena stopped. Her lips pressed together. "This is the first time. I promise you, it's the first time. I've never brought her before. My neighbor usually watches her, but she's in the hospital. It's not serious, but I couldn't reach anyone else and I didn't want to cancel because I know Tuesdays are your..." "Stop," Marcus said. She stopped. He looked at the child again. The child had not moved. She was still watching him with those broad, bottomless eyes, completely undisturbed by the tension radiating between the two adults in the room. "Finish your work," Marcus said. He looked back at his laptop. "Keep her out of this room." A pause. Then, quietly, "Yes. Of course. Thank you." He heard Elena exhale. He heard her voice, soft and murmuring, as she steered the child back down the hallway. He picked up his coffee. He told himself he had not noticed the way the child smelled faintly of baby shampoo and something sweeter, like warm vanilla. He told himself his chest had not done the odd, tight thing it sometimes did in the doctor's office when the nurse asked him if he had anyone at home. He opened a spreadsheet. He did not think about the child's fearless eyes. He thought about them for the rest of the afternoon. The watch had been a gift from his father. That was the only sentimental object Marcus Calloway owned, and he had owned it for 22 years. His father, David Calloway, had placed it on Marcus's wrist the evening before the old man's first stroke, as if some quiet part of him had known what was coming. It was a Rolex Datejust, steel and gold, the face a pale champagne color that turned warm in certain lights. The strap had been replaced twice. The crystal had been replaced once after a fall on a construction site in his early 30s, when Marcus had still been doing some of the physical work himself. The watch had not worked in 4 months. He had not taken it to be repaired. He wore it anyway, every day, because it had been his father's and because he was not ready to hand it to a stranger. There was something about leaving it at a repair shop, something final about it, that he kept avoiding without quite admitting that he was avoiding it. On the Tuesday after the child had appeared in his doorway, Elena came back. She arrived at 8 in the morning as usual. She was alone. She said nothing about the previous week, which Marcus respected. He left for the office at 8:45. At noon, he realized he had left the watch on his bathroom counter. He did not usually leave it there. He usually put it on immediately after showering, in a single unbroken motion, the same way he put on his shoes or tied his tie. It was a ritual. He did not break rituals. He told himself he would retrieve it at lunch. He did not go home at lunch. At 5 in the evening, Elena sent him her standard end-of-day text message. "Finished for the day. Spare key left in the lockbox as usual. Have a good evening." He went home at 6. He walked through the front door, dropped his coat over the armchair near the entrance, a habit he had been trying to break for 11 years, and walked through the open living area toward the hallway. The watch was not on the bathroom counter. Marcus stood very still for a moment. He looked at the counter. He looked at the small tray where he sometimes left items, his phone, his wallet, his keys in the morning. The tray was clean. The counter was clean. Elena had wiped it, as she always wiped it, and somewhere in that process the watch had. He began to search, methodically, the way he did everything, starting with the most likely locations and working outward in expanding circles. The counter, the tray, the floor near the counter, the windowsill, the edge of the sink. Nothing. His stomach did something he had not expected. A sharp, cold lurch. Not the sensation of losing an expensive object, but the specific, private panic of losing something that could not be replaced with money. He stood in his bathroom with his hands at his sides, and he felt something that he did not often allow himself to feel. Fear. Small and bright and completely real. He was pulling open the drawer beneath the tray when he heard it. Footsteps. Very small. Coming from the hallway. He walked out of the bathroom. She was standing in the hallway, the child, again, somehow, wearing the same yellow sweater, the same small leggings, and this time 2 pink boots that were definitely on the wrong feet. The wispy ponytails were back. The gray stuffed animal was under one arm. In her other hand, she was holding his watch. She was holding it very carefully. That was the thing that hit him first. Not the surprise of finding her in his home again. Not the mystery of how she had gotten in, but the extraordinary carefulness of her small hands. She had the watch cradled in her palm like it was a bird's egg, like she understood, in some wordless animal way, that it mattered. She looked up at him. Then she walked forward. 3 steps. 4. She stopped just in front of him. tipped her face up, and held the watch out, offering it. Marcus did not move for a full 3 seconds. He crouched down slowly until he was at her level. Up close, her eyes were even larger. There was something in them that was not quite wisdom and not quite innocence, but something that sat precisely between the two, like the light just before sunrise when it isn't morning yet, but it's no longer night. He held out his hand. She placed the watch in his palm with both her hands, pressing it firmly, as if making sure he understood this was a real transfer of something real. A transaction made with full intention. "Thank you," he said. His voice came out strange, low and unsteady in a way he didn't plan. She nodded once, very seriously. Then she said something, a word, one syllable, and he couldn't be sure, but it sounded like it might have been okay. Then she turned around and walked back down the hallway, boots squeaking gently with every step. He stayed crouched on the floor long after she was gone, the watch in his palm, staring at the empty hallway. He could feel the faint warmth her hands had left on the metal. He could hear the blood moving in his ears. He had been inside his own home for less than 4 minutes, and somehow, something had shifted. He couldn't name it yet, but he felt it the way you feel a change in weather, somewhere deep in the bones, before the sky has given you a single reason to believe it. Her name was Lily. He learned this not from Elena. He had not thought to ask Elena, but from the child herself, in the unexpected and slightly alarming conversation that developed 2 weeks later when Marcus arrived home early again and found Elena in the kitchen washing windows, and Lily sitting at the kitchen table with a piece of paper and a crayon, deeply committed to a drawing that appeared to be a large orange circle surrounded by smaller circles of various colors. He stood in the kitchen doorway. He had not intended to enter the kitchen. He had intended to get a glass of water from the bar cart in the living room. But something about the tableau, the sound of the squeegee on glass, the total silence of the child's concentration, the way the November afternoon light came in low and golden through the clean windows, stopped him. Lily looked up. She had a smear of red crayon on her left cheek, placed with the confidence of someone who does not yet know that art supplies are not face paint. "Ha," she said, which was, apparently, her word for him. "Hi," he said back, because it would have been strange not to. She pointed at the drawing. "Dis." He looked at the paper. The orange circle he now saw had eyes, 2 dots and a curved line beneath them. It was smiling. "Is that the sun?" he asked. She shook her head with some vigor, clearly offended by this interpretation. "Is it a person?" She nodded, then pointed at him. He looked at the orange circle with its 2-dot eyes and crayon smile. He looked back at her. "That's me," he said. She nodded again, satisfied, and returned to her drawing. Elena had gone very still at the window. She was not looking at him, but he could see the careful stillness of her shoulders, the way a person holds themselves when they are trying very hard to take up no space. "Does she come every Tuesday?" he asked. A pause. "No." "I know. Her daycare works most days. It's only when something comes up." "I'm sorry. I should have asked." "What's her name?" he said. Elena turned. She looked at him with an expression he could not fully read, wary but also something else. Searching, maybe. Like she was trying to figure out which version of him was standing in her kitchen. "Lily," she said. "Her name is Lily." He looked at the child. Lily had added what appeared to be a very large hat to the orange circle person. It was blue. It was possibly the largest hat in the history of hat wearing. "Big hat," he said, without particularly meaning to say it aloud. Lily looked up immediately. "It's important," she said. "It's important," with the absolute conviction of someone who has never once been wrong about anything. He felt it again, that shift in his chest, the one he couldn't name. Warmer this time, like a door opening in a room where the heat had been off for a long time. He poured himself a glass of water. He did not go to the bar cart in the living room. He stayed at the kitchen counter for 22 minutes, half watching Lily draw her way through an entire sheet of paper, then a second, while Elena finished the windows and began cleaning the counters. Nobody spoke much. But it wasn't the silence he usually kept in his home, the flat, carefully maintained silence of a man who had decided that people were complications. It was a different kind of quiet, the kind that fills up naturally with small sounds and small movements and feels, improbably, like company. At some point Lily held up the second drawing. It was him again, another orange circle, though this one had arms and what might have been shoes. She had written something above it in the uneven, enormous letters of a child just beginning to understand what letters were. 3 letters. His name, he realized. Elena must have told her. MRC. Marcus. He reached out and took the drawing. She released it with both hands, the same serious, transferring motion she had used with the watch. He stood there holding a piece of paper with a smiling orange circle on it, and his name misspelled in 3 letters, and he could not, for the life of him, understand why it felt like one of the more important things anyone had ever given him.
He took it home that night. He put it on his desk.
He told himself this meant nothing. He straightened it twice. The next Tuesday, he left the office at 4 instead of 7. He told his assistant it was a personal matter. His assistant, who had worked for him for 9 years and had learned to ask very few questions, said nothing. He stopped at a grocery store on the way home. The first time he had been inside a grocery store in approximately 4 years, having used a delivery service since long before it became fashionable. He stood in the fruit aisle for a full 2 minutes, uncertain, before choosing a small container of strawberries because they were red, which seemed like the kind of color a child who drew in bright orange circles might appreciate. He arrived home to find Lily sitting on the kitchen floor, not at the table, on the floor, surrounded by a scattered collection of what appeared to be blocks and 2 spoons and a pot lid.
She was building something.
The architecture was unclear, but the commitment was absolute. He crouched down next to her and held out the strawberries. She looked at the container. She looked at him. She reached in and took 1 strawberry, bit it perfectly in half, and handed the other half back to him. He sat down on the kitchen floor. In his suit, he ate the half strawberry. He couldn't remember the last time he had sat on the floor. He couldn't remember the last time he had been offered half of something. He started learning things about them in pieces, the way you learn things about people when no one is officially telling you anything. He learned that Lily was 3 years and 4 months old, and that she had been born in February, because Lily herself announced this one afternoon apropos of nothing, holding up 4 fingers. She hadn't quite mastered the specific number yet, and saying, "I born February." Marcus had not known what to do with this information except nod and say that February was a fine month, which made Lily nod back, as if he had confirmed something she'd long suspected. He learned that Elena had been doing this job, domestic work, house cleaning, for 4 years after she had left a different career. He didn't know what that career was. He learned it indirectly, through the way she talked once, very briefly, about paperwork, about before things changed, and then stopped herself and steered the conversation somewhere safer. He learned that she was raising Lily alone. Not from Elena. Elena never said this directly. He learned it from the absence of certain things. No mention of a partner. No we that wasn't her and Lily. The way she arranged her schedule around Lily's daycare hours with the precision of a woman who had no backup, no net, no one who would catch things if she dropped them. He learned that she was exhausted in the way that isn't visible all at once, but accumulates in small details, the slight shadows beneath her eyes, the way she sometimes paused mid-task for just a moment longer than the task required, as if gathering herself from somewhere far away and bringing herself back. He did not ask her about any of these things. He wasn't sure he had the right. But on a Thursday in mid-November, something shifted. He had come home to find Elena sitting at the kitchen table. Not working.
Sitting.
Her hands were flat on the table in front of her, and she was looking at the wood grain, and she did not hear him come in. Lily was asleep on the small couch in the sitting room just off the kitchen, a blanket pulled up to her chin, still wearing her boots. The pot lid collection was stacked neatly near the wall. Elena looked up when he walked into the kitchen. She stood immediately, that startled, "I should not be here" motion of someone who has been caught taking up space. "I'm sorry," she said. She fell asleep, and I was just going to sit for a moment. Elena, he said.
She stopped.
He sat down at the other side of the table. For a moment, neither of them said anything. The kitchen was very quiet. Through the sitting room doorway, he could see the small shape of Lily under her blanket, one boot pointing up. Is everything all right? He asked. It was not the kind of question he asked people. It required a genuine answer, and genuine answers took time, and he did not usually make space for that. But he asked it. He asked it, and he meant it, and he waited. Elena looked at him for a moment like she was deciding something. Then she looked down at her hands. Her daycare is closing, she said. The building is being sold. They told us last week. They're closing at the end of December. A short pause. I've been on 3 waiting lists for other centers. The good ones near our apartment, the ones on the bus line, have waits of 6 to 8 months. The ones I could get her into right now are an hour away by transit, which means I'd have to leave at 6 in the morning to get her there before I could get to work, and I don't. She stopped. I haven't figured it out yet. I'll figure it out. She looked up. I'm sorry. You don't need to hear this. I asked, he said. She looked at him. I asked, he repeated, because I wanted to know. So, you don't need to apologize for answering. Elena looked at him for a long moment. Something was moving across her face, something careful and complicated, the expression of a person who has learned, through experience, that unexpected kindness from unexpected directions sometimes comes with a cost. He understood, seeing that look, more than she knew. He had spent most of his life operating from that same guarded place, not trusting anything offered freely, calculating what the cost might be, determining in advance what it would take to pay it. It had made him rich. It had made him alone. He said, I have a spare room off the 2nd floor. A small sitting room, actually. It's empty. It has a window, it gets good light in the morning, and it has a door that locks from the inside. If you needed a space to bring Lily while you work, until you find a place, or as long as you need, that's not a problem. Silence. Elena's eyes were very bright. She blinked once, slowly, the way people blink when they're managing something that wants to come out a different way. Mr. Calloway, I'm not offering you charity, he said, before she could say it. I'm offering you a room in a house that has 16 other rooms that are doing nothing at all. Lily is quiet when she sleeps and not particularly destructive when she's awake, and she drew me as an orange circle, and I thought it was accurate.
A beat.
That's the full reasoning. A sound came out of Elena. Not quite a laugh and not quite a breath, something between them. She pressed her hand briefly to her mouth. Then she said quietly, Thank you. He nodded. He stood up. He said, Let me know if the room needs anything. There's a lamp in the storage closet on the left. He went back to his office and closed the door and sat down at his desk and looked at the drawing, the orange circle with its hat and its name spelled wrong in 3 large letters, and he thought about the way the room had felt in those minutes at the kitchen table. Less empty than usual. Considerably less empty. December came in quietly that year, the way some months do, not with a storm but with a slow lowering of light, the days shortening until the sky was already turning gold when Marcus left the office at 6. He started leaving the office at 6. This was new. Before, 6 was not a time he recognized as an endpoint. Before, 6 was mid-evening, midpoint between the afternoon meetings and the late-night calls with the East Coast team. He had built the architecture of his days around the belief that presence equaled production and production equaled worth, and that stopping, truly stopping, in any complete sense of the word, was what lesser people did when they lacked the will to keep going. He no longer believed this entirely. He wasn't sure when it had changed. Sometime between the morning Lily had held his watch in her careful hands and the Tuesday she had fallen asleep on his couch, and he had sat across the table from her mother and asked a real question and listened to a real answer. Sometime in the spaces between those moments, something had begun to undo itself, quietly, without announcement, without his permission, and he found that he did not hate it. Lily had taken over the sitting room with cheerful efficiency. Elena had brought a small bag of her things: the stuffed animal, a set of board books, a plastic box of crayons, a change of clothes. Lily treated the room like a kingdom she had always owned and was simply returning to. Within 1 week, there were drawings taped to the wall. Within 2, there was a crown made of paper and tape sitting on the windowsill. Marcus had not mentioned the drawings or the crown. He had, without speaking about it, begun to add things. A small cot, purchased and assembled on a Saturday morning while listening to a business podcast that he realized, 2 hours in, he had not absorbed a single word of. A basket with several books. Picture books, chosen from a display at the front of a bookstore he had walked past and then backed up and walked into for the first time in his adult life. A lamp with a warm bulb that made the room feel, in the evenings, like a place people wanted to stay. He didn't say he had done any of this. Elena didn't mention it directly. But one morning she looked at him over her coffee. She had started making coffee for both of them when she arrived, without asking, and he had started drinking it, also without asking, and she said, "She loves it. The room. She told me it's her castle." "She has reasonable real estate taste," he said. Elena smiled. Fully, this time, not the careful partial smile she had given him in the first weeks, the one with the exit route already built into it. A real one, all the way up. It did something to the room, that smile. Made it larger somehow. More present. He had begun to understand that presence, real presence, the kind he had spent his adult life evacuating from his daily experience, was not the weakness he had always treated it as. It was not inefficiency or softness or the thing that happened to men who had run out of drive. It was, in fact, the thing he had been building everything toward without knowing it. All the money and power and structure, it was all scaffolding. And a building made only of scaffolding is just a very expensive cage. He was thinking about this on a Tuesday evening when he came home to find Lily sitting on the hallway floor in her boots. Always the boots, always slightly wrong feet, with a book open on her lap. She was reading aloud. She could not actually read yet, but she had the book memorized well enough that she tracked the pictures with her finger and told the story in her own words, with occasional editorial additions. He sat down on the hallway floor, without really deciding to. His back against the wall, his long legs bent at the knee, his good suit jacket absolutely getting dusty. Lily looked up, looked back at the book. Read him 3 more pages. When she got to the end, she closed it with both hands and looked at him. "That's it," she said. "That was a good story," he said.
She thought about this.
"Yep," she agreed. He looked at the cover of the book. A small rabbit. A large moon. He thought about his father, who had read to him exactly once that he could remember, a night when Marcus had been small and sick and his mother had been away and his father, uncertain but willing, had sat at the edge of the bed with a book and read out loud in a voice that was too formal for the task but so earnest that it hadn't mattered. He thought about the watch. How he still hadn't taken it to be repaired. How it felt less urgent now than it had in October, not because it mattered less but because he had found that carrying a broken thing didn't mean you were broken. "Lily," he said. She looked up. "Your mom is lucky to have you," he said. Lily considered this with great seriousness. Then she reached over and patted his hand twice. Pat, pat. With the absolute confident grace of a person who has understood, at 3 years old, that sometimes the right response to something big and true is something small and certain. He put his hand over hers for just a second. Just a second. It was enough. On the last Sunday of December, Marcus Calloway did something he had not done in 11 years. He cooked. Not with his chef, not by following a video, not with delivery containers staged in his kitchen to look effortful. He cooked, badly, honestly, and with complete sincerity, because Elena had mentioned, at some point, that Lily's favorite food was pancakes, and because Marcus had woken up that morning before his alarm with a specific thought. Pancakes. He had all the ingredients because he had gone to the grocery store on Friday. He went to the grocery store most Fridays now. He had stopped using the delivery service sometime in November. He hadn't made a conscious decision about it. He had just found that he liked going. He liked the way the store smelled in the early morning. He liked the ordinary weight of choosing between two kinds of orange juice. He liked, and this was the part he could not have admitted to a single person in his professional life without losing some crucial part of his reputation. He liked thinking about what Lily might want. Whether they had that yogurt she made a specific sound about. Whether the strawberries were good this week. He had the batter mixed when Elena appeared in the kitchen doorway in a gray sweater and loose-fitted jeans, her hair down, her feet in socks. She stopped. She looked at the bowl. She looked at him. She looked at the flour on his sleeve. "You're making pancakes," she said. "I'm attempting pancakes," he corrected. She came into the kitchen. She stood beside him and looked at the batter. "You need more milk," she said. "I followed the ratio." "The ratio is wrong." She took the measuring cup. "Trust me." He handed her the measuring cup without argument. They cooked together in the morning light of his kitchen, Lily appearing 20 minutes later in her pajamas and her boots. The boots were apparently a personality trait, not a phase, and climbing without invitation onto one of the kitchen stools, placing her elbows on the counter, and watching them with the solemn attention of a food critic at a very important restaurant. They ate at the kitchen table. Marcus ate 4 pancakes. Lily ate 2 and part of a third, most of which ended up on her chin. Elena made coffee. The light was bright and winter-thin through the clean windows. At some point Lily climbed off her stool, walked around the table, and climbed onto Marcus's lap. This happened without announcement or request. She simply arrived, settled, and picked up her fork again. Marcus sat very still. Elena was watching him. Her expression was careful, the watchful, reading expression of a mother whose child has claimed something and who is waiting to see how the world responds. He put his arm around Lily so she wouldn't fall. She didn't fall. She ate her pancake. He looked down at the top of her head, the wispy hair, the slightly loose ponytail, and something moved through him, something large and patient and long overdue, like a river working itself free from ice. He thought about his father, about the watch on his wrist that still didn't run, about the 22 years since the morning he had sat in a hospital room and watched the old man's breathing change, and the way he had left that room and built an empire and never once sat still long enough to grieve what he'd lost, because if you didn't stop, you didn't have to feel the stopping. He had been running for 2 decades, not from anything as simple as grief, from the deeper thing beneath it, the fear that if you let people close enough to matter, you gave them the power to leave. And the damage that left behind was the kind of damage that didn't show in any audit, that no CFO could calculate, that no market position could offset. He had decided, somewhere around age 30, that the solution was not to let anything matter that much. He looked at Lily. Her cheek was against his arm. She had fallen asleep, exactly like that, between one bite and the next, with the absolute trust of a person who has never once doubted that the place they are resting is safe. His throat was tight. He looked up at Elena. She was watching him with those quiet eyes that had learned, over the past months, to read him the way you read weather, not by what he said, but by what the air around him was doing. "She does this," Elena said softly. "She just decides someone is safe. And then that's it for her. No more convincing required." He looked back down at the sleeping child in his lap. "She returned my watch," he said. His voice was rough. "The first day. She didn't know me. She just picked it up and brought it to me and handed it over like it was obviously the right thing to do." "That's Lily," Elena said. "She was right," he said. "It was the right thing."
He paused.
"But it wasn't about the watch." Elena was quiet. "I've been treating time like it was infinite," he said. "Or like it only had value if I was spending it on something productive, on something I could measure." He stopped. Started again. "My father gave me that watch and I've been wearing it broken for 4 months because I didn't want to leave it somewhere. I didn't want to let go of it long enough to fix it." He exhaled slowly. "I think I've been doing that with everything." The kitchen was very quiet. The winter light came in. Lily breathed slowly against his arm. "You can fix it," Elena said. "The watch." "I know," he said. "I think I'm ready to." She smiled. Not the careful smile. Not the one with the exit route. The full one, the one that made rooms larger. He took the watch in and left it to be repaired that week. He picked it up on a Friday morning, strapped it on outside the shop, stood on the sidewalk in the cold December air, and looked at it ticking. Steady. Still keeping perfect time. Even after everything. That evening he came home to Lily's drawings on the wall and Elena at the kitchen table and pancake batter in a bowl in the fridge, because they had gotten into the habit of Sunday mornings and didn't want to break it. He stood in the doorway of his own kitchen, his home, which was no longer just rooms and square footage and a number on a ledger, and looked at what had grown here in the space of 3 months, without his planning it, without his designing it, without a single spreadsheet or forecast or strategic vision. Just a watch. And very small hands. And a kind of love that doesn't ask permission before it arrives. He walked in. He sat down. He stayed.